Hello! The video that follows demonstrates bank statement reconciliation in the Power Query Excel checkbook. It groups queries in the Query View panel, revisits variables and if statements in Power Query M-code, utilizes M-code to filter rows in Power Query tables, and provides an example of the Excel let function. I hope you'll find it useful.
This is the fifth video in the Excel Power Query Checkbook series and demonstrates bank reconciliation through Power Query. But before we start with bank reconciliation, I'm going to do two things. One is I'm going to put a button to run the macro that transfers our clean data, our credit card data, over to the transactions worksheet. And I'm giving myself a little room in here. Going to the Developer tab, inserting a button, choosing the transfer macro, and then labeling it transfer credit card to expenses. Okay, well, we need a little bit more room, I guess. Let's bring that down a little. There we go. So when this button is clicked, the data from our clean table here, plus the payment data, moves into the transactions worksheet. The other item that I want to take care of before we move into reconciliation is categorizing the queries and connections. So we did not have these into folders before, and that's simply a matter of going to each of the queries, right-clicking and moving to a group. If you don't have the group yet, you create a new group. If you have a group, you just move them into the group that you have. So I did a little organizing of the queries that we have created so far, one with the credit card to and the other in categories. We have to have a worksheet and we need queries for every different credit card though. Our example was credit card 2. We are ready to move into the reconciliation process. I've created a new worksheet called Reconcile, put it next to the credit card 2 sheet. Let's go over to it, and did a little typing, put in the target month, because we're going to need to know what month and year we're reconciling, and then we need the beginning and ending dates of that month. We're going to use the reminder sheet, and specifically the table month, TBL month. Let's make sure that's what it's called, TBL month right here. We're going to use that table to help enter the proper months and days. So let's go back to the Reconcile sheet. Here's our month, and we need data validation. So let's go to the Data tab. With data validation, we want a list. And here in the source, we're going to use the indirect function because data validation will not accept structured table references, but it will accept an indirect and a text string that looks like a structured table reference. So we have TBL month, and we want the month. And put it as a string, apply the indirect to it, and click OK. And now we can choose any of our months. So let's choose April just to have something in there. And next we need the year. We're always going to be reconciling a previous month once the bank statement comes out. We already have a record of the year in the transactions worksheet. It's called Cal Year. It's a named range. And that works for every month but December, because when we reconcile the December statement, it's going to be January of the following year. So if we come back over to Reconcile, we're going to put an if statement in here. if the location with the month, which is C2, if that equals December, we're going to move back a year, which means we have our named range cal year minus 1. If it's any month but December, we'll use the cal year. That's our month and year for reconciliation. Now we'll just adjust the formatting so it stands out. Year will be on the right. And we'll put months in yellow and years in orange. And we'll bold the month and the year. Good. Now we move to the beginning and ending of the months that are shown in our month-year list. The beginning is easy. It's always the first of the month. So to grab an actual date from that, we use the date value function. And once again, we're going to use that table. We're going to go ahead and match whatever month is in here in the our table month. In the month column. We want an exact match. That will begin our month number, and then we just have to concatenate the first day to that. So there's our first day, and concatenate to that the year, which is right there. And of course it comes as a number because that's how Excel stores months, and we just go over to the format and format it as a short date. That will always give us the first day of the month that we've chosen here in C2. The last day is a little more complicated. Let's go over to our table. We want to grab this last day from the days column rather than just the first. So we're going to use one of the new Office 365 functions, the let function, to give us a way to create a variable that we're going to use more than once in the equation. So let's start with the let. And we're just going to need a variable name. We're just going to call it mm for month. And what that's going to represent is a match function, which is going to go to C2. So it'll grab whatever month is in there. And again, our table month with the month and an exact match. So that's our variable. And now let's do the date value. We start with the mm and concatenate to that a /, and concatenate to that an index function which will grab our last day. So we have the table month days, and we have to match our month, and that's our mm, and we concatenate to that the / and the year. And once again, format that to a short date. This ensures that we have the first and last day of the month, whichever month we choose. And we'll just bold these to have them stand out a bit. Before we move to the reconciliation power query, I'm going to do two things. One, I'm going to make this a table so that we can reference by position locations of the month and the year when we get to the power query. So I'm just going to highlight the cells, hit Control T to make a table. It does have headers, and I'm not going to use the formatting. I'm just going to grab a blank formatting and take out the filters. So I'm going to go to the Home and Sort and Filter and remove the filters. We still have a filter on the months, but we don't need one on the table. And while we're in the table, let's change its name. I'm going to call this TBLSTMNT for the bank statement, TBLSTMNT. And that's going to be the name of our table. And then we're going to take this. We're going to need the ending date in our power query, and we're going to make that a named range. We're going to call that STMT for statement end, E-N-D. So that's going to be a named range. And we're ready for the power query, which is going to come in here. The source of our data is going to be from the transactions table. And the idea behind the reconciliation is we need all of the cleared items, and we have to total their amounts. We can see that the August transactions have been cleared. So we should go ahead and reconcile the August bank statement. So let's go back into the Reconcile sheet and choose August as our month. We're going to put our Power Query reconciliation table here. And now we'll go back to Transactions, click anywhere in the table, go to Data, and from Table Range, because that's going to be our source data. For the moment, we're going to take out the automated type change. We do want to use the source as the TBL check table, but we're also going to include a few variables. And to enter those, we're going to go to the Advanced Editor. And these variables are going to come from the table we created in the Reconcile sheet and the named range. So let's put in the code, and then we'll see if we can explain it a little bit. I'm going to enter it here. We have the variable YR, which is coming from the current workbook, and that's our TBL STMNT table. And we can see that we're going into the year column, and the 0 means the first item in the year column. And the same is true of the MO, which is in the month column and the first item of the month column. The DT, which is going to be the date variable, is connected to the named range, STMT end, and it doesn't have a table column. So name ranges always have column 1, and it's always the first item because they don't have table structures. So that's going to be our variables. We'll put those in. And we can see when we hit on year, we get 2021. The month is August, and the date is August 31st, which is our end date. The first thing we're going to do with our source data is just to filter it so we are only dealing with cleared items. And we do that by going to our clear column, by clicking on the text filters, and we're going to equal the C. So we just want to see the C, and that will mean we're only dealing with our cleared items. Rename the step. Filter to C. Don't need this thing. Now let's go ahead and put in the data types. So date's going to be a date. Pay ID, I'm holding the shift key down, description, memo, and category. They're all text. What else do we have here? Type is going to be text. Amount and balance will be currency. Clear will be text. And then we'll rename this. Set data types. Just to be sure that we don't pick up any cleared expenses that are after the last day of our reconcile month, we're going to create a custom column. So we're going to go to Add Column, create a custom column with an if statement. We're going to call this column CLADJ. And it's going to be an if statement. So if the date is less than or equal to the date from gotta get that right, the date from our DT variable, then we're going to get the month. Otherwise, whatever's in the clear column. Okay. And as we can see, we got the month for all of them because the date range falls into the correct sequence. Let's rename this, adjust clear. And now we will filter this column so that we will only have the rows that show our reconciling month. To do that, we're going to look at when we filtered to C. You can see it says table, select row, source, each clear equals C. Well, we're going to use a similar syntax, except we're going to have our clear adjust equal month. So it'll be the same kind of thing, table.select rows. So let's put it in. After we put a f of x here. And now we'll do our select row code. And that will allow us to only see the rows where we do have August in clear adjust. Looks like I've got a spelling error. There it is. And now we've ensured that we have cleared expenses and we have just the correct date rows. Let's rename that and call that filter dates. And finally, we select the columns we're going to return. So I'm going to return the date column. And I'm holding down the control key here as I pay ID. We're going to bring back description and memo. We'll bring back category. We'll bring back type. And we'll bring back amount. So those are the rows we're going to return. We'll remove other columns from the Home tab. Rename this Clean Columns. And we're ready to close and load. We're going to do a close and load too. We're going to bring it back to a table. It's going to be in an existing worksheet. It's going to be the Reconcile Sheet, and we're going to start at row 8 and click OK. Let's move to the Reconcile Sheet. There it is. I think we're going to change the appearance of that. Let's make this big enough so we can see our dates. And we have now brought over the table that we're going to use to compare against the bank statement for August. I think we'll go ahead and format this as accounting. Let's rename this query to BNK_reconcile. And we'll close it. So let's now go to the query that goes and retrieves the bank beginning and ending balance. And if we go to the Files worksheet, we can see that's called bank.xlxsx, and that's an Excel file with the beginning and ending balances on it. You will likely have a PDF, but you can get a PDF query by going to the Data tab. Let's go ahead, go to the Data tab and get data from a file and from a PDF file. You'll just have to find out what works best for you, but I'm going to get this from a workbook because I happen to have the bank XLSX file, and we got the sheet, and we're going to transform that data. We can see this is our previous balance and our current balance, and we're way the heck over here. Once again, you'll have to examine your bank statements and the way they're given to you. And as I said, most likely that'll be a PDF file. But we are, as we see, we've got the numbers are in column 5, and those are the only rows we need to keep. So over here in column 5, we can go ahead and remove any of the empties. So we'll only keep our balances, and that's the previous and the current. And since we know the top one is the previous and the bottom one is the current, we can go ahead and only keep column 5, which means that we can remove every other column. Change this to balances. And this too, let's see where we are. Decimal number, that's fine. We can leave that alone. We can close and load that. We're going to bring that to the Reconcile sheet as well. We're going to put it on a table, existing worksheet, but we're moving over to the Reconcile sheet. And we're going to put that on column E, row 3, right there. Click OK. Let's go to the Reconcile sheet. We should make that green right here. We'll make that green. There we go. And now we should rename that query. going to call that BNK balance. Well, BAL for bank balance. Enter that. Keep. And we should be in pretty good shape. But I think I should go back and rename some of the steps to be consistent. So let's edit the query. And we can keep the header, the promotion of the header. So let's rename that to promote headers. We'll keep the change type, set data types. This is our, we're going to find the balances. Keep the balance. And then we call that rename column. Okay. And once again, let's make this big enough so we can see everything. And now we calculate differences. Make that a capital D. So first in the bank statement, we have our ending balance and subtract from it the beginning balance. And we'll make that accounting. And then we need the total of the amounts from our cleared expenses. And so let's add a total row to the table. Table design, total row. And we'll make that a sum. We can see that the totals match, so we do balance, but let's go ahead and get the calculation in here. We're going to take the totals right there, and we're going to subtract from it the difference of the bank balances, and we get 0. And this is what we want. When we have a 0 amount, we have a balance, and then we have reconciled the checkbook, and then we have to provide an indication of that in the transaction sheet.